We are going to be talking about felting and the difference between felting and fulling. So in modern times, we really just use the word felting. We don't really talk about fulling, but I do want to touch a little bit on the historical aspects and the differences of what felting and fulling are. And then we're going to learn all the skills that we need to know to make this pillow. So with that being said, I want to make sure everybody is aware Giselle is in the chat, and she's going to be, we're going to be talking back and forth, and she'll be ready to answer any questions or forward them on to me as needed. So fulling is actually the process of cleaning and shrinking cloth that has been woven. So traditionally, cloth would be woven and wool cloth would be woven, and then it would be put in water and agitated, and it would shrink a little bit, and the cloth would become tighter, and it would become more water resistant and warmer. And that is what fulling is. And so because we are knitting this cloth, we're knitting the yarn first and turning it into cloth, it is more of a fulling technique, but fulling was traditionally done by working with woven fabric. And then technically, when people talk about felting, felt is made by using wool fibers that have not been processed and turned into cloth in advance. So if you think about needle felting, how we use just roving for needle felting, you can also just use, if you take raw wool that hasn't been spun into yarn, you can lay it out and just get it wet and put some soap on it, agitate it with your hands, and you can turn it into a piece of felt or a piece of cloth like that. But that's a different class, and there's a lot of different techniques that you can do to create felt. So fulling and felting are pretty much kind of the same thing, but they're not exactly the same. But most people, when they talk about felting, they are usually talking about taking knitted or crocheted fabric and then turning it into felt, which is technically it is more like fulling. You can use crochet also. A lot of people think that you can only do this with knitted fabric, and I didn't make any crocheted samples in advance, but I have done felting with crochet before. And the main thing is you do have to make sure you're using 100% animal fibers that are not processed to be superwash. So what we need is we need wool that has basically straight from the sheep that has been just spun into yarn. And you can use wool, you can use alpaca, you can use camel, you can use llama, angora. Any animal fiber or natural fiber will work except for silk, because silk isn't hair. Silk comes from the silkworm. So there's a big difference between silk and, even though it is a natural fiber, it's not going to felt. So it's a complete different process. So what we're looking for felting would be either wool or also for fur. So the difference between wool and fur is kind of a technical difference, but the main difference is just the way that we talk about it in the language that we use. Because they're chemically exactly the same, they're made out of keratin, and there's really not much difference between fur and wool, and even human hair. Pretty much they're all the same thing. Usually fur is more sleek, and it's usually shorter, and it's usually softer. Wool tends to be longer, and it tends to be curlier or crimped. So that's basically the main differences between them. And fur is used for felting quite a bit. If you think about like felt cowboy hats, or like a good quality felt hat can be made out of beaver fur or rabbit fur, and then processed and turned into felt that way. So, and then that's a felting process. That's not a fulling process. So, any questions about the differences between felting and fulling?
Hi,
Or about the
Darren.
different?
No, I think everyone's being very keen on your explanation. No messages or questions just yet.
Let me put my microphone in. My microphone. It's not my little. Okay.
And so the way that we measure the difference between wool, the quality of it is by micron. And we talk about how thick the diameter of the hair is. And merino wool is between 15 and 25 microns. And then human hair is between 50 and 120 microns. So that's the main difference between like human hair and fur and wool, is just the thickness and the coarseness of it. So we've probably all seen people with dreadlocks, and dreadlocks, basically all dreadlocks is hair that has been matted together and basically felted. So that's pretty much probably how felt was invented, was when people's hair naturally formed into dreadlocks. Then they realized that they could probably, do that with the animal fibers they have, and then create products that could be used and could be helpful. And felt is actually the first fabric that was ever created, and it was actually found in Siberia in Mongolian tombs that are from 700 BC. So felt it probably was invented by accident. So, and the reason that the hairs or the fur or the wool will felt together, if you look at a hair under a microscope, it's actually not as smooth and as sleek as it feels. It's coated with a scaly substance called a cuticle. And when you think of like the way the scales on a fish or on a snake kind of overlap and they all kind of point down, when you heat the hair and you get it wet, and then when you rub them together, those scales open up. And then as they're rubbing together, they kind of lock together. And then that's what creates the felt. And that's what creates the solid fabric, is those scales kind of locking together. And then the individual hairs also tangle up together. And so that's basically how we create the felt. And what you need to do that is we need heat, and we need water, and you need movement. So you need to be able to agitate it, or you need to be able to agitate it, rub it together, or it's the easiest way is just to put it in a washing machine. That's what I find. So, so any questions about any of that?
No, not yet. I think they're dying to see something actually made with your hands. Let's see.
Okay, so here is the pillow that we're going to make with all this, with the skills we're going to learn today. And this is created actually by a technique called fulling, because I knitted the fabric first, and then I put it in the washing machine. And fulling it's technically a finishing process. So you're basically finishing the fabric. And then another thing you can do to finish the fabric, it's called napping. And you can brush this with a nylon brush to bring up a fuzzy, kind of a furry technique. And then another technique is called shearing. And so if you brush this and bring up a fur or a fuzzy surface, then you can shear it to make it all the same length, to make it look more uniform and more intentional. So there's 3 different ways of finishing the fabric. And this was originally done by hand. So people originally, when they would weave the fabric, they would actually process it all by hand. And it's a very labor-intensive process. That's where, I don't know if anyone watched Outlander. They actually showed the women processing the wool and making it into cloth. And they call it walking the wool. And it's either walking, tucking, or fulling. And that was one job that was only done by women. So none of the men were ever allowed to participate in the walking of the wool. And the women would sing working songs while they were processing it. And they would all get together in groups, usually between like 10 to 20 people or women. And they would sit around a table. They would roll the fabric up. It would be like long yardages of fabric. They would roll it up, and they would get it wet, and they would probably put some soap on it. And as they were singing their songs, they would twist it and pound it and rub it together and pass it to the next person. And that's what would create the motion, the agitation, the heat from their hands, and then the water that's what recreate what's needed to make the fabric to be more of a felt. But they would process it in a way they wouldn't felt it completely, and it would actually remain, it would keep a nice drape. And so that's what they would make like kilts out of and different things like that. So one thing they did use, which is kind of disgusting, is they used stale urine. And the stale urine was often used in ancient times for laundry and for dyeing of wool. And after it sits for several weeks, it gets more of the ammonia comes out of the urine, and it was used to clean. I mean, it doesn't sound like it would help clean it, but it was used to clean the wool, because when they would spin the wool and weave it, it still had a lot of the natural lanolin in it. And so this would help to, the ammonia would help to clean the ammonia out of the wool to make it so that it was more usable. So, and then I would hope they would clean it after that. Like I would want to like give it a second rinse after that. So, okay. Any questions about the history of felting and fulling and then the differences between them?
Sure, just Lisa wants to know, her washer doesn't have one of those built-in agitators. Will it still create enough action for fulling?
Well, I mean, I'm sure it does. I mean, the clothes don't just sit in there, do they? Or do they spin around, don't they?
Those do spin, but maybe it won't get right that, but I'm sure, yes, to desoil your laundry, it must do something.
Definitely.
So I think we should definitely give it a go.
Okay, yeah. So that moves us kind of right into the next step of the class, which is once you are going to decide. So let's go ahead and switch to the view of my hands, and we'll look at some of the yarn, and then we're going to talk about it. So this is Wool-Ease Roving, and this is a new yarn by Lion Brand. And it's available on lionbrand.com or michaels.com. And it's also available, I think, in almost all of the stores. You can go into the store and you can look at all the colors and you can feel it. It has a really great feel. So it's nice to see it in person. So pop into your local Michaels and see if they have it stocked already. It's really pretty new. It comes in a lot of really great colors. So here are some other colors that comes in this orange, and kind of this kind of grayish teal, the bright. So there's a lot of really good colors that it comes in. And so I created a couple of swatches so that we can look at the difference. So this is one that I knitted on a size 10.5 needle. And if you notice, it actually calls for a size 8 needle. When you're creating felt, when you're creating a piece of fabric that you're intending on washing and turning into felt, you want to use a larger needle than what is recommended. It seems kind of counterintuitive, but if the fabric is loose, then as it's washing, the fibers have more freedom to kind of move around, and then they'll be able to lock together better. If you knit it up at a very tight gauge, it's not going to have as much freedom to move around, and it actually won't felt as much. So this was a size 10.5, and then I did an 11, and then I just went up to a size 19 to just just to see what would happen, honestly, just as an experiment to see. And I made 2 of them. And so you can see this one on the size 19. It felted, but there are still holes in it. So I wouldn't probably like that for a project. I mean, depending on what you're making, it could be, something you're interested in. But the 11 and the 10, and I think it was the 10.5, actually made a very nice felt. Now, one thing that I want to caution you is felting is an art, and it's not a science. And even if you do the exact same thing every time, sometimes things don't always turn out exactly the same each time. Now, this is something I've never had happen before. Usually, whenever I make a piece of cloth and felt it, it usually shrinks a lot this direction. Usually, it doesn't shrink as much side to side. Usually, it shrinks more from top to bottom this way. Now this piece, it didn't really even shrink at all. And I've never seen that before. So that's something I really found unusual because the navy blue lines are actually lining up pretty even. So, if it doesn't do what you're expecting it to do, maybe that's just, part of the excitement or part of the artistic charm of it. But so you can do all the math and you can anticipate and you can, have all the experience that you think you need, but sometimes things still don't work out exactly the way that you think. I mean, it did shrink a little bit this direction, but usually it shrinks a lot more. So the way that I shrink it, the way that I use the felt is I just put it in with my laundry, with my jeans and towels. Really, the rougher the laundry, the better. I've heard people put tennis balls in with it to really get that agitation going. You could wash it with shoes, but I just put it in with like my regular weekly laundry. And the laundromat that I go to has a front-loading washing machine, and it doesn't have one of those things in the middle that agitates it. I'm not sure if that's what was referred to before, but
That's right.
it doesn't have it's just the movement. So it's just the movement of it tumbling and rolling around. That's what will create the felt. So any questions about that?
No, but yes, definitely. That's a good call out with the tennis balls. That could be a nice agitator.
Yeah, so you can put tennis balls or anything like that in it. So, okay. And then here is the actual swatch that I did for the pillow. So if you're going to make, depending on what you want to make, so I wanted to make a pillow. So I did the striping. I did the stripes. I thought that was really cute. I just did garter stitch because I thought it would give it a nice texture, but you could certainly do stockinette stitch. One thing about stockinette stitch that I want to caution you about is because it rolls. Stockinette stitch usually does roll up. When I felted stockinette stitch before, sometimes it has rolled and kind of felted like that in an uneven way. And then you end up losing some of your felt. So if you're going to use stockinette stitch, you might want to make sure that you are making it a couple of inches larger than what you think, just to give yourself that extra bit of waste.
Speaking of which, actually, how do you gauge how much knitted fabric you need for a project?
Okay, well, we're going to cover that in a few minutes. So I have a whole thing written out. So yeah, but you can see that this one actually shrunk quite a bit from top to bottom, but not very much from side to side. So this is usually what my experience has been whenever I'm felting or fooling anything, is that like the cast on and the bind off edge is where you create most of the shrinkage. And if you've ever washed a wool sweater by mistake in the washing machine, if you notice when you pull it out of the washer, it always looks really short. It's like you could almost wear it as a cropped sweater. Like it doesn't shrink as much side to side as they usually do shrink more this direction. So, but you can never be sure what's going to happen. So, but I thought the garter stitch gave it a really kind of fun texture. I don't know if you can kind of see the it's kind of like almost like a boucle in the yarn, but I just thought it was a fun texture with the garter stitch. Any questions about, and then you can, when you put it in the washing machine with your laundry, and then of course the front loaders, you can't open them until it's completely finished. And then when you take it out, then you can decide whether or not you want to put it in the dryer. Now, because it's still wet, when you put it in the dryer, it's going to have the heat and it's going to be, tumbling around. It's going to continue to felt pretty much until it dries. And then once it dries, then the felting is going to kind of stop. It might do a little bit more, but so you can make that decision between the washer and the dryer if you want to continue felting it or not. And then if it doesn't felt enough, you can put it in the washing machine and complete the whole process a couple of times and it'll keep shrinking down and it'll keep getting denser and thicker. So depending on what you want to make and how thick and how dense you want the fabric to be, that'll determine how many times or how often you want to put it through the washer or the dryer, or maybe just the washer. So you can also, you don't have to put it in the washer or dryer. I've taught classes before where we do all of this by hand. So if you take your unfelted swatch, you can put it in a sink or a bucket or like some kind of a basin. And again, you just need the water and you need heat and you need to agitate it. So if you put this in a bucket of hot water and you just rub it around and scrub it and dunk it up and down and do all kinds of stuff to it, it will felt, it will shrink. You do have a little bit more control out of it that way because you can kind of see what's happening and maybe stop exactly at the right spot wherever you want it to be. You can also roll it up in a bamboo placemat. So that's one thing that I've done before is you go somewhere or on, you order a bamboo placemat, one that's able to roll up with like the real bamboo, the real bamboo sticks, and you roll it up in a bamboo placemat, and then you just roll it. And the more you roll it, it will and get it wet with some hot water, it will felt. And then you can turn it this way and roll it up and keep rolling it. And that's, so you can either just do it in a bucket of water or you can roll it in a placemat. I've heard people use like an electric sander, like they'll roll it up and put an electric sander on it and then the vibration makes it felt. I've never done that, but anything's possible as long as you're getting that movement and it's wet, and it's best if it has warm or hot water, really helps contribute to the felting process. So any questions about how we make it felt or what we need to do or?
Yeah, I think you answered it. Someone was wondering about the temperature of the water, but definitely hot.
Yes, the hotter the water is, of course, you don't want to burn your hands, but
right.
Even if the water is just warm, it'll still felt. But if you can get it, nice and hot, especially in the washing machine, just put it on the hottest setting and then just run it through. Sometimes it didn't really fade, but it could, depending on the yarn or the wool that you're using, the color could fade out of it, but
I'm assuming the more natural dyed yarns, maybe.
Yeah, so, but this one didn't really, it seemed like it held its color pretty well. Any other questions?
No. Mm-mm. What is your favorite project to make with this technique?
I think felt makes a great bag. But, if you knit or crochet a bag and then you put a bunch of stuff in it, sometimes it can stretch out of shape if you don't put a liner in it. But if you felt it, then you don't have to put a liner in it and it's not going to stretch out of shape as much. So have you ever seen a felted bag before?
Yes, very cool.
Yeah, so they're fun. And you can choose what stitch pattern you want to use. You don't have to just use stripes. I was actually going to make a sweater, and I did a Fair Isle pattern where it had 2 moose on the back and a pine tree. And then I didn't ever finish the sweater, so I recently ran it through the washer and dryer, and I'm actually going to turn it into a pillow because I did all that work. I may as well be able to use it. So think of different ways. And even if you go into a thrift store and buy an old sweater that is 100% wool, you can wash and dry a finished sweater and turn that into felt. And then you can you can cut it up at that point and make that into a pillow or a bag or any number of things. You can just basically think of it as fabric at that point. So you can really make any number of things out of felt. It's pretty amazing. Okay, any questions? Any other questions?
Yes, Nancy wants to know if the felting process makes the piece too small, or if it makes it too small, can you stretch it out a little?
A little. One thing you can do once you've felted it is sometimes it doesn't come out like nice and square. As you can see, this one's kind of shaped kind of oddly. If you use a steam iron, and you can kind of stretch it. And I've heard different people put like hair conditioner in it to kind of soften up the fibers. You can kind of re-stretch it and reshape it a little bit, but I don't know if you could get like a lot out of it. So once it's felted, you're kind of locked in, but you can increase the shape and you can kind of reshape it with by steaming it and kind of pulling it and working with it. So
that's right.
A little bit.
And I know you mentioned it has to be natural fiber, especially wool. What if it's a blend? Does the
If
felting
it-
work as much or is better?
you can try it. If it's blended with something like acrylic or cotton, then or silk, it's not going to felt very well. But
Mhm.
that's where a swatch comes into play. So if you don't like, if you want to make a pillow, don't knit for hours and make some great big piece of fabric and then think you're going to felt it and have it not work. Always make a swatch first, a test swatch, and see. I say try it, but usually I would think it would have to be at least 75% or 80% natural wool to felt, or maybe even more than that. So I don't recommend it, but I mean it's always fun to try and see maybe it'll work. Who knows?
Right. But yes, good idea about when in doubt, just swatch it out.
Yeah, do a swatch first. Don't do some huge project and then find yourself disappointed. So as long as there's enough, if the wool fibers can grab onto each other and felt together, it might create a really fun effect. The acrylic or the cotton or whatever's in it might end up getting kind of like raised up or kind of pushed out, or it might create like a really uneven kind of an effect in the cloth that could be really fun. So it might be worth experimenting with and seeing how that would work. Same like if it had a metallic, if you had 100% wool that had a metallic thread going through it, something like that could be really fun in a felted piece. And you might get something really unusual or unexpected. Any other questions?
Yeah, no, not right now.
Okay,
But yeah, you're right. And you were mentioning your moose sweater. That could also be a really fun wall hanging.
Yeah, it could be. Or I was thought about maybe turning it into a bag too. So I've already felted it, and it turned out really nice. I want to steam it out and get it to lay really flat, and then maybe I'll make it into a bag or a pillow. I really haven't decided yet. So don't if you have an old wool sweater that maybe has a hole in it or a stain on it, then think about running it through the washer and dryer and then turning that cloth into a new project. It could be, could give it a whole new life. So
I take it you don't have that one there.
no, it's not with this yarn, so I didn't bring it. So but I mentioned it just so that people can realize that you can use a already completed item that maybe if you knit socks and maybe you worn a hole in your handmade socks, you don't want to throw them away because you put so much work into it. You could felt them if they're not superwash and then use the leg of the sock as like a sleeve for your water bottle or something. I mean, there's lots of different things you can do. And once you felt it, then you're able to cut it. That's what gives it the opportunity to be used. You can't cut knitted fabric and then use it unless if you're steeking it because it'll unravel. But if you can cut felted fabric and you don't have to hem it if you don't want to, and it's not going to unravel or anything. It's a nice sturdy fabric. So
nice. We call upcycling now.
Yep, upcycling. I'm all about reusing stuff, especially something I've handmade. If it's kind of not working out, you can always figure something to do with it. You don't want to waste that effort. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Continue.
All right, let's go back to the view of my hands, and we're going to look at some math, which I do not like math. Do not like math. So, but it is important if you really want to make sure that you're getting an exact size. And again, remember, it's an artistic thing. It's not really going to be an exact science. Sometimes the wool will just react in different ways. I don't know if there's a way to control it any better or not, but you always kind of have to have that open mind. So with my swatch, I had 35 stitches and I did 66 rows. So 35 stitches and 66 rows. And before, I don't know if you guys can see this, before the fulling process, it was 9.5 inches square. So it was pretty much a square. And then after the fulling process, the stitches, it was 8 inches by 7.5. So it was 8 inches. So it's about, and this is where you kind of have to be a little forgiving because it's not perfectly square anymore. So here at about the smallest point, it was about 8 inches. If you measure it up here, it's pretty much 9.5, but you can see that it's shrunk in an uneven way. So it's 8 inches And it's about, I did about 7.5 inches. You want to give yourself a little extra. And if you do the math, if you divide 35 stitches by 8 inches, you get 4.37 stitches per inch. And if you do 66 rows divided by 7.5 inches, you get 8.8 stitches per inch. And I wanted to do a pillow that was about 12 by 16. So I multiplied 16 by the number of stitches per inch. And I got the number 69.92. And you should always round up several stitches to make sure that you're giving yourself some room for that, fluctuation. So you could do 80 stitches. I would recommend doing 80 stitches. Now I made my swatch first and then, knitted my project. And so that's what I came up with. And then I wanted 12 inches length. So to get 12 inches, I cast on, I got 90 rows. So I did about 100. Now I did mine all in one piece and then I folded it over. So I actually did twice as many to give myself enough of the front and the back all in one piece. But if you want to do the front and the back separately, I cast on 100 and then I doubled that to, I'm sorry, I cast on 80 stitches and I knitted 200 rows and that gave me the front and the back. So I didn't have to do a seam across the top. So you can see the top, if you can tell, there's the seam on the bottom, but the top doesn't have a seam. So I just folded it in half and seamed the sides and then the bottom. So now I'm not good at explaining math, but we can go over this again if we want to. Do we have questions about the math? If there are any mathematicians out there, I hope I didn't make anybody angry because
No, it's quiet. So a bunch of smarties here.
okay, I really had to sit down and concentrate on this because math is not my friend.
But yeah, I don't make many pillows, but that's a great notion of just making a really long rectangle and folding it over and only seaming the sides and the one across. I learned something. Yay.
So it does give it a little bit more structure if you do a seam, but I didn't mind. And one thing I did that I don't usually do is I stuff this with fiber fill. Usually I use an insert. And when you use a pillow insert, it gives you a more of a square shape. Whereas, when I say square, I mean like with right angles, it's straight lines. Whereas this one, because I just hand stuffed it, it's kind of, it's not shaped out as in a nice as a rectangle. It's kind of got these kind of wonky lumps in it. So if you want it to be more structured and have more of a a proper shape, then you could use a pillow insert instead. But if you use a pillow insert, then you have to make sure you're getting the right measurement. So I would make the pillowcase first, see what your measurements are, and then decide on what insert you want. But if you're just going to use fiber fill, then it doesn't matter really how it turns out. So any questions about any of that?
No, someone just wanted to reiterate if the knit should be looser or denser for this. And I mentioned that it should be looser so that the stitches have more room for friction, right?
Yes, yeah. I always make it looser. Go up a needle size or two, maybe 3. If you're a very tight knitter, you can go up, 2 or 3 needle sizes even and see. But then that's when your swatch will give you, if you want it to be really tight, go ahead and do a tight one and wash it and dry it and see how it turns out. And if you like it, then that's the right one. So the only person that can decide whether it's right or wrong is you, as you're making it. So.
Very good.
Any other questions?
No.
So once you, I want to show you this. So after I took it out of the washing machine, this is just a photograph of it. And you can see this was my pillow, and it's not square at all. It's, really the edges are kind of weird. And you could just leave it like that if you want an odd shaped pillow or just some kind of an organic or abstract. But all I did to make it square, and I'm not super fussy about stuff like this, is and again, when I say square, I mean with right angles and straight lines, like more like I just laid a yardstick out and I just cut right along it. I didn't even you could use like chalk or you could do something and draw a line, but I just laid a yardstick out on it and then I just cut it so that it was, so that the lines are pretty straight. I didn't fuss over it too much. So, to cut it, once it's felted, you can cut right into it and it's not going to unravel or anything. So I just wanted to demonstrate that. And you can kind of see what the inside of the felt looks like. Like it's not gonna, it's a solid, and of course we wouldn't want to cut this kind of a fabric unless if we're steeking it, and that's a whole other class, but that's something else that's fun to do. So yeah, once you felted it, or it's gone through the folding process, it's a complete different type of fabric, and you can feel free to cut it into any shape that you need at that point. Okay.
What about re-wetting it and blocking it? Would that do anything?
Yeah, you can wet it and block it out and kind of reshape it a little bit. If you want it to be a little bigger or maybe a little bit more, but if you're going to try to reshape it, but you're never really going to make it perfectly, right angles by doing that. When I was using mine, I used a steam iron and I got really hot and steamy and I pushed really hard on it and kind of worked it out. And that kind of helped me reshape it. You certainly could kind of pin it out and let it dry and maybe go through that process 2 or 3 times and you might be able to get it pretty square. But I still think you're going to have to cut it and reshape it. But you might be able to reduce the amount of waste that you have by doing that a couple of times if you want to.
Yes, but definitely hence making it a little larger.
Yeah.
To accommodate for that.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No, someone did mention a rotary cutter too. It might be their preferred cutting method.
Yeah, if you have a rotary color, but again, all I did to cut it was I just kind of laid a yardstick out and used it as a guide. I didn't really fuss over it too much, but you can decide how fussy you are and live your life accordingly. Okay. And then when I sewed it together, you just fold it in half. And I used for this, usually when I'm sewing things that I've knitted, I usually use the same yarn that I made the project out of. But for this, because it's felt, I didn't feel like the roving would go through it very well. So I just used a needle and thread. I don't even know what, just a good solid, a good sturdy thread is all you need, nothing special. And I think I just did the, I like a running stitch. So where you just go back and forth. So if you come out on this side of the fabric, then you'll re-enter the fabric on the same side and go back across. And you might want to, maybe you want to go over it twice if you want to make sure it's extra strong. The thing you want to try to do is you want to try to keep all of your stitches spaced out about the same distance. And you want to try to keep them about the same depth. Like you don't want to randomly just make a really deep stitch, and they're not big seams. So just take your time. And then also as you're sewing, one thing that can happen is sometimes it can stretch as you're sewing it. So you make sure that you put a clip in the middle, maybe here, and then one on the end to make sure that it's not stretching as you go. So you can either use like quilter's clips or clothespins, or you can use the kind of clips you use like on a potato chip bag to keep it from stretching out. And then you can kind of double check it as you reach each one. For a little piece like this, I probably wouldn't worry about it, but for a larger piece, you want to put a clip maybe 2 places in the middle and then one on the end, just to make sure that you're not stretching it as you go. Okay. And you could also do the whip stitch if you want, where you're always entering the fabric from the same side, like this. And then you're just kind of leapfrogging over. And either one of these will give you a nice seam that's not going to show up too much. I would probably double seam it. I would probably get to the end and then go back across. And then you just put your stuffing on the inside, after you've done both sides and done most of the top, you put your stuffing on the inside or your pillow. And if you really want to, you could do it. Maybe you want to set a zipper so you can take the insert out and maybe wash the pillowcase, or I just sewed mine completely shut. So you can then, or, maybe you want to turn it into a bag, like wouldn't this little piece here, that could be, a little bag that you could keep, change in or something in your purse, or you could make it big enough to keep your phone in, or maybe you want to make a needle case or something. At this point, you could make any number of things out of it. So, any questions about anything we've covered today?
No, we've covered most of it. That is a very cute little coin bag.
Yeah. So just the most exciting part is when you take it out of the washing machine and you see what it looks like, because you never really know what's going to happen at that point. But and if you decide to hand felt it yourself, just be prepared, because it is very labor intensive. It can take quite a long time. And it seems like it never felt and it never felt and nothing's happening. And then all of a sudden it's shrunk too much. So just be careful it doesn't get away from you. Anything else?
No, you see that little guy there, if you were to cut that little wing off, I know the striping is going the right way, but what would happen?
Then you could cut it here. I mean, if you cut it here, just cut that wing off, then the stripes are going to be weird. But if you go down to here, I could follow that yellow, I could follow the pink one across. And it would, then the striping pattern, it would still continue correctly. So,
right.
But it's just funny how you never know what's going to happen. Anything like that could change once it's in the washing machine. You can see I'm kind of fussing with it a little bit. You might be able to block it out and get it a little bit more square. All right. And that is felting and fulling. And once you've experimented with it a little bit, you can really make all kinds of great things.
So then sort of like a needle punch or other felting, that's a completely different thing, right?
Yes, needle felting is a complete different animal. It's done completely dry. There's no water or soap or anything. And you can actually do needle felting with acrylic, and plant fibers don't work as well because they're usually pretty stiff. But if you have a really soft, fluffy cotton, like a cotton ball type of a feel, you can get a little bit of needle felting with that. But it works very well with silk and nylon and acrylic. But most people do use wool and animal products, but you don't have to. You can use anything you have available, you can really use. So.
Right, and you can sort of sculpt that way too, make little figurines.
Yes, you can make three-dimensional sculptures. People make very realistic animals. I've seen pictures online where they look actually like real, like they'll make like a little cat or something, and it looks like an actual real cat. I'm not that good. I've done little gnomes and little owls and like little toys. You can do flat needle felting. You can do a 3D. You can a two-dimensional drawing like on a sweater. If you have a sweater that has a hole in it, you can do needle felting and cover that hole and put a little picture on it, like a little flower or heart or something. So, but that's a complete different. That's a whole other animal. Okay, any other questions?
No.
So
this is a great way to start felting, by felting a piece of fabric that you knit or crochet, and then get adventurous and start to do the needle felting.
Yep. So you could, yeah, and you could also, you could crochet the fabric or you could weave the fabric. So depending on what technique you like best, just make sure you're doing it a little bit looser so that the fibers do have enough room to kind of move around and felt together.
Yeah, someone wants a class on needle felting. Maybe.
Well, there is one. There should be one that's recorded. We've taught it on here before with Michael's, and I don't know if they. How does that work, Felicia? Can they find it, or did they?
We have several. I'm going to see if I can find them, which I'm sure I can, and I will post it in the chat.
Yep, yeah. There's several of them, so we've done it several times. It's a lot. It's a lot of fun, actually. So.
What crochet stitch would you recommend for felting?
I think any of them would be fine, but I would. Well, if you do triple crochet, then you may end up getting holes in between because you know how they're not really connected. I would probably do maybe single double or half double. Maybe not triple, but again, swatch it out and see what works. But I would probably do half double or double. I don't know. I just like a half double.
Yeah, half double kind of goes with everything.
Yeah. But just go up a hook, go up 2 or 3 hook sizes to make sure it's looser. But I've done felting with crochet, and people say you can't. I've had people tell me you can't do felting with crochet, but I don't like to be told what to do, and I say give it a try.
Very good. And have you ever felt or null binding? What is that?
Well, null binding is, you can felt any fabric. So if you do null binding, which is, it's kind of a precursor to knitting and crochet that the Vikings used to use. They would actually use when they were weaving, they had short lengths of yarn that would be left over from their weaving. And instead of just throwing them away, because if you think about it, they spun that. There's so much work to create, the string. So they would use short lengths of yarn that made fabric that was very similar to knitted or crocheted fabric, but it's done with a needle that's kind of like a darning needle. And once the fabric is created, it's hand wash only, or else it's going to shrink. And if it shrinks, then now you're fulling. So yeah, so any fabric, it doesn't matter how it was made.
Right. But I like your idea of also trying it out with a thrifted sweater or swatches.
Yeah,
Sure.
That's fun. Yeah. Okay. All right, so do we want to take a short break in between classes, and I'll get my samples ready to talk about all the different types of Wool-Ease that are available and different projects we can make. How does that sound, Giselle?
That sounds great, and hopefully some of our viewers now will stay around as well, so everyone can take a short break, and we'll reconvene a few minutes before 3, a couple of minutes before 3, and yeah, talk about Wool-Ease.
Okay, sounds great.
All right.